Okay, welcome back everyone. You made it to the closing session, and thank you again for participating in today's virtual event. We hope you've got lots of good ideas, got to wander around the exhibition and pick up some good tips from the exhibitors. Maybe met a colleague or two in the meeting hub, and obviously those spotlight sessions are there for you to watch. Now, Naomi is going to continue on from her opening session, answering a few of our questions and obviously then looking at some observations and insights. So I'll hand it over to you, Naomi. And once again, if you have any questions, please pop them in the box on the panel and we'll get to as many of those as we can. Thanks very much, Naomi.
Awesome. Thanks, Margot. So I have the pleasure of wrapping up today, and I thought I would reflect first on this idea of future safe. In doing so, I thought about what it means to be future safe. And so I thought I'd break it down into the two words, future and safe. And so when you think about future, unless you're a clairvoyant, there is a whole lot of unknown. Other words and concepts that come to mind to me were uncertainty, volatility, possibilities, complexity, and even ambiguity. And then if we look at the word safe, what comes to mind is protection, healthy, security, and well-being. All concepts that as safety professionals we're very familiar with. What is interesting with the notion of future safe is that we should be aware of the strategies of how to deal with these future unknowns in our workplaces. And there's this acronym called VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And this term originated from the US Army College, who defined the fall of the USSR as a state of VUCA. Let's click over. No, that's not what I was after. My apologies. So VUCA, if you're sick of saying COVID, you can say VUCA if you like. It's a good alternative. And when we look at VUCA in terms of managing health and safety, we need to consider the volatility of our industries and markets and the different challenges of and what is known about those challenges. When it comes to uncertainty, more broadly, we can relate it to jobs and casual employment. But at the front line, it may be about a lack of information about hazards and risks, and COVID is a prime example of that. Complexity is always at play when we're managing health and safety, whether we're dealing with the complexities of physical and psychological well-being and how they interact, how you can engage and consult with workers to get them on board. Can be difficult when we see things like the Gallup report and their survey around employee disengagement being above 50%. And then we have to deal with the ambiguity of our various safety laws, codes, standards, guidelines across all the jurisdictions, whether they're harmonised or not, and also within our profession, how we practice health and safety management. Should we be using safety 1, safety 2, or is there a mix of them, or is there something else that we should be doing? As health and safety professionals, how we deal with VUCA will vary by the way our management style, but also the industry that we're in. Some may look to systemize how to deal with change through standard change management systems and principles and practices. Some will be very traditional and prescriptive, and others may take more of a social psychology approach. And of course, some may do something just a little bit different, and they may look to the stars. And I found this rather interesting for those who are Cancerians. They have been given some wise words recently of how to successfully deal with VUCA. This was in Saturday's paper, and it suggested that we should look to what is small change and how that can have a significant impact. And so while I had a bit of a chuckle at this advice, I think there really is something in that piece around the concept of small change, and whether it is VUCA or COVID around us, what we have found is that small changes can be significant. For example, washing your hands. Interestingly though, when I read my stars in that same paper, I got a little concerned. Apparently I'm about to face a challenge, and that if I don't make those small changes, I will be disappointed. But then I noticed I can use my extraordinary celestial energy to create positive change. And although I haven't yet rung the number to find out where I put my celestial energy, I'm thinking about this concept of small changes. So other than using extraordinary celestial energy to manage VUCA or change successfully in your workplace, I want to go back to the idea of this systematic change management thinking. And I want to highlight a recent survey that was published on the 2020 Workplace Report into the state of change in Australian workplaces. Now, this report is quite interesting, and I wanted to share some of its findings with you about managing change and how COVID has impacted change and what makes change successful even when you are struggling. So David Cooper-Ryder provides an introduction into the report, and he asks two questions. So he opens by saying the age-old saying, change is the only constant, and it has likely echoed in the halls of your organisation. It is perhaps the epitome of irony, however, that while we know these words to be true, we continue to cling to outdated conceptualizations of change itself, and that too many organisations maintain a simplistic view of change grounded in change management theories. And the principles of scientific management that govern the industrial age have left an enduring legacy on our approach to change, resulting in an antiquated mindset that change is something to be managed with a discrete beginning and end. And it is this mindset that has contributed to an enduring negative narrative of organisational change. And he poses the two questions. What if we updated our view of change to be more appropriately reflect the current reality of continuous disruption that compromises our world and our workplaces? And what if we expanded our view of change to embrace the reality that there are not always clear indicators of success or failure, and instead recognise that change is actually an open-ended development process with often no clear start or end point? And if we're constantly thinking about future safe, then there is no end point. So this study looked at uncertainty and struggle with change, and they found that 34.9% of Australian workers report that they are struggling with the amount of uncertainty that change brings. And 17% of Australian workers see COVID as a transformative catalyst that will forever impact how change is made. What is really interesting about that stat, though, is that the majority of workers don't see how we will learn to create change from the COVID experience, either in the short term or the long term. And so what we can take from this is that the importance of leadership, prioritising conversations about what's working, where are the struggles, and what can be done differently to create a new normal are really important. When it comes to thriving change, 31.1% of workers found that they felt completely able to help create positive change in their workplace. And the study found that while working from home during COVID, workers felt satisfied and positive with the change. And those that did had higher levels of what they referred to as change ability, motivation, and psychological safety. And this was attributed to workplaces who provide better and greater knowledge, tools, and support for their workers. The study then introduced this concept of these 5 change factors, which they refer to as the magic. And they identify this needs some further research, but the magic being meaningful work, activation of strengths, generative and diverse conversations, invitations to self-organise, and clear feedback. And they discuss what it means for me, the worker, to have coaching conversations, we, the team, and helping leaders to inquire how workers can take responsibility, and us as the organisation, and how to create an environment where the magic can happen. So I go back to one of David's questions. What if we updated our view of change to be more appropriately reflect the current reality of continuous disruption that compromises our work and workplaces? So we've just heard from Corey, who discussed the possibilities of cloud-based integrated management systems, which is an area that is constantly improving with technology for the past 5 years and will continue to do so. Sarah discussed the change in mindset to see safety as an investment and how it can increase productivity, and that future thinking should consider the benefits to health and safety success that go beyond cost avoidance. Todd then raised the concept of how leaders can ensure their people are committed to prioritising safety through using storytelling and other modalities for messaging. We can continue to learn in the future from the past and continue to share those lessons learnt. Greg then discussed the role of behavioural science in increasing engagement and managing safety, mental health, injury risk, sleep, fatigue, and health and wellness. And this is really important now and in the future. And lastly, James explained, well, I think he explained machine learning and data science and how we can use data to give meaningful health, safety, and cultural insights. I don't know if I'm now more confused about what it all means, but it was a really great overview, James, how HR systems can talk to health and safety management systems and claim systems, and how we can collect, analyse, evaluate that data and actually make improvements in the future. So I'd like to thank all those speakers today, and of course thank the sponsors and exhibitors also for the event. It's not an event without speakers and exhibitors and sponsors. So now that I have talked about future safe, I want to go back to the past and answer some of the questions that we ran out of time earlier on answering. So I had a few questions here that I've written down. So going back to the discussion around enforceable undertakings, there was a question around victim impact statements conducted, and yes, they are. So I talked about speaking with victims and third parties, so that's part of that process. It just depends on how the regulators in the different jurisdictions administer enforceable undertakings as to how much involvement the victims have. There's certainly victims and or third parties, and there certainly could be more involvement, I believe. There was another question around 200, just over 200 enforceable undertakings and why that number is so low. This is a good question. There's a couple of answers. One, they're very political, and I'll just put a full stop at the end of that. The second reasoning is they've only recently been introduced. 2003, 2004 was when they first came into play in Australia in health and safety legislation. Obviously, they've been in other forms of legislation, but in a more administrative base, so to speak. And across Australia, they're only fairly new in the last 5 years or so for New South Wales, South Australia and Northern Territory. And even New Zealand's fairly new users of the enforceable undertaking approach. And the other reason why it's so low is there still needs to be a balance. So while I talked about the issues of prosecution and retributive justice and penalties and fines and deterrence, I don't believe it's a full shift. There still needs to be that balance, and the EU is an alternative approach. And so it is important that we still prosecute cases so that we are setting those, we are trying to create deterrence through those maximum penalties. So regulators need to make that decision if they're going to accept an EU or not. And they have they put a test around, what's in the best interest of the public for that case. There was a question around the government in terms of Victorian government and the management of COVID, and I assume possibly also the Ruby Princess in New South Wales. In terms of safety and the health and safety laws. I can't comment quite directly on this, but what I wanted to tell the audience was that there have been government entities who have undertaken an enforceable undertaking because of a health and safety prosecution. So it is possible to have an EU for a government entity. It is possible to prosecute. So I wouldn't rule it out that it is possible to see something come out of Victoria because of COVID. The most important question I got that I really wanted to answer was, why aren't EUs named and shamed? And I thought this was an interesting question because actually in Queensland, its EUs are the only ones to be named and shamed. So we have our regulator has a publishing policy that relates to our Statutory Interpretations Act, which means that a successful prosecution can't be named and shamed, which is mind-blowing considering that I'm going to read you a quote from a magistrate that came out of a fatality of a 14-year-old boy back in 2018 on a farm. And the number one thing that the magistrate said in that case was, general deterrence and denunciation, naming and shaming, is of significant importance. That person and that business has never been named, has never been shamed, and no one knows them. And they are still in business. So if there was an enforceable undertaking, there wouldn't be because it was a fatality, we would actually know who that is and they would have questions to answer basically. So in terms of EUs, they are all published on every regulator's website. You can go find them. I would suggest that it's media don't find them very interesting, and that's why we don't see much of them. And there was another question around it wasn't a question necessarily, but it was more so a statement around an EU doesn't bring back a person or it doesn't address a serious injury. And you're completely right. I am very much about proactive health and safety management. It was actually an interesting career moving into enforceable undertakings and having to deal with the aftermath basically of a health and safety incident. And so my approach and my mindset is really, yes, we can't bring that back. We can't change what has happened, but we certainly can learn from that, and we can take those learnings and we can share them both in the workplace, but more broadly across industries and communities, and we can help to improve and be proactive in those spaces. So make something positive out of a negative, so to speak. Unfortunately, like if you weigh up the alternative to prosecution, and equally a prosecution doesn't bring back the person as well, doesn't reverse their injuries. Now, I did have a couple of questions around workers' comp and insurance and things like that. So enforceable undertakings doesn't remove or replace any of that. That still can happen. It does make it potentially more difficult for a personal injury claim because there hasn't been a determination of negligence when a company chooses to give an EU, as opposed to if they go to court and plead guilty, there is a level of negligence that's been accepted. Was there any other questions? My next slide is actually the question slide. Margot, have we had any other new questions come through?
No new questions that I can see in the panel. Just a couple of thoughts, but with 1 minute to go, I guess we've timed that pretty good.
I think we have.
Naomi, we really appreciate you spending these few hours with us. We know that you've got a very busy job, and that you know, being in Queensland, we're all very jealous of, you know, you being able to move around quite freely and happily.
My short sleeves.
In your short sleeves, having lovely little holidays up and down the coast. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it. The recordings will be sent out to everyone in our thank you email, as will any other links that the presenters provide. And if there's any other questions that I see come up, I'll certainly send those through to you to get you to respond if you wouldn't mind. If everyone would like to move back to the timeline in a moment, Mari, our CEO, will be wrapping up the event and thanking our presenters. And so once again, thank you, Naomi.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.